Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. We are going to continue talking about Women's History Month, and today we are reading about a famous woman in history, Amelia Earhart. She is a famous pilot. So make sure you have your paper and pencil in case you need some notes, and let's get started. Our goal today is to use key details to support the main idea. So we're using those key details to prove that our main idea is actually the main idea. So some vocabulary, some you should be familiar with. We have the main idea, what the whole story is about. And we also have those key details, which are like the important facts from the story that help prove the main idea. So if I say like Amelia Earhart was a really brave woman, I need to find some key details to prove that. I can't just say it. I need to have some proof. Okay, so here's where we are starting today. Remember, yesterday we read up till it was talking about Amelia Earhart. She was a famous pilot, and she was going to cross the Atlantic Ocean all on her own in a plane, and she'd be the first woman to do it. But this is talking about her first flight where she was a passenger on the plane that someone else flew across the Atlantic. So it says, Amelia was just a passenger on that 1928 flight. She called herself a sack of potatoes because she felt like she had no purpose. Still, her life would never be the same. The first woman to cross the Atlantic made headlines around the world. So even though she said she didn't really do anything, it still made headlines because she was the first woman to cross the Atlantic in a plane, even though she wasn't flying. After the flight, she was very famous, very busy, writing books and giving speeches about flying. She had no time to go back to work at the Denson House. She also designed clothing and luggage for active women like herself and even helped launch 2 airlines. Eventually, she married George Putnam. She also continued to fly. She tested new aircraft on cross-country flights, flew in contests, and set records for long-distance flight. So here she is after that first flight that she made. It says she's in Southampton, England after the 1928 flight. So there's where she actually flew across the Atlantic. By the time she was 39 years old, Amelia had made every major flight there was, except for one. She wanted a new challenge. The greatest challenge left was to fly around the world. Only one pilot, a man, had ever flown around the world several years before, but he had not followed the equator, the longest and most difficult route. This was the route Amelia would fly. Would she make it? And here's a picture of her being interviewed during public speeches. So on this page, we could look and we could say, why did she want to do this flight around the world? And if I said like the main idea of this page is that Amelia wanted to fly around the world, I need to look for those key details to prove, like, why did she want? So I can look right here. She'd already made every major flight there was, and she wanted a new challenge. And like that greatest challenge was to fly around the world. I could also look down here and say, like, there's only a man who has ever done it. And she wanted to follow the equator, which was the most difficult route. She really did want, like it says up here, she really wants a challenge. By this time, no one doubted Amelia Earhart's flying skills. On May 21st, 1937, she took off with her navigator, Fred Noonan. A navigator is someone who like plans a path, like reads the map, tells you where to go. They went from Oakland, California to Miami, Florida in a new silver Lockheed Electra. It was the first leg of her flight around the world. So they started here and then they went to Miami. Last flight. Amelia and Fred first stopped at the Electra in Miami, Florida. The new plane had crossed the entire North American continent, passing its first test. Then they started the route around the equator that George Putnam, Amelia's husband, had carefully planned. Each stop was uneventful. They flew to South America, so that's right here. Africa, India, Asia, and it doesn't even show it on here, Australia. It appeared that Amelia Earhart would once again pull off a historic flight without a hitch. So then I could look at this page and I could say, what do you think without a hitch means? What do you think that phrase, without a hitch? It says right here. It appeared that Amelia Earhart would once again pull off a historic flight without a hitch. So I'm going to look up here, and it says each stop was uneventful. Un means not, an event is like what happened, right? So like there weren't many events. So I could say like, oh, I think without a hitch kind of means like nothing bad happened. On June 29th, 1937, they stopped at Lae, New Guinea, an island in the Pacific, just north of Australia. So she went to Australia and then like they stopped right here. There, Amelia and Fred enjoyed their usual routine. They fueled the airplane and checked their maps. They sent telegrams back to the United States. A telegram is kind of like, it's an old-fashioned thing because they didn't really have a lot of phones. So you could like type a message and then it would send it to the person, kind of like an old-fashioned email almost. When they took off from Lae, there was no hint of any trouble to come. As they neared Howland Island, the next stop, their radio messages became odd. The tiny island was to be their last stop before Hawaii and then back to California. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Istika waited offshore to receive Electra's radio signals and help it find the island. Those radio signals were patchy. That means like, you know, when you're on the computer and you're hearing like, it's like patchy, like you're not hearing the whole message. So they were patchy and strange. It seemed that Amelia could not hear the Istika's messages. She spoke of a storm, yet the weather over the island was clear. More than 20 hours into the flight, Amelia's voice said, "We're running north and south." So that would mean like they're going up and down. We're running north and south. She was never heard from again. So if I asked you, what strange things happened before Amelia disappeared? I could say that's the main idea, right? Some strange things were happening before Amelia disappeared. And then I could look in the text to find those key details. What were those strange things? The radio signals were strange, and Amelia couldn't hear Istika's messages. This is also really strange. She said there was a storm, but they didn't see any storm over the island. And then the last one where she said, we're running north and south, so we're going up and down. And then she was never heard from again. So those are the strange things. She couldn't hear the messages. She talked about a storm, but the weather was clear. And then she was saying they were running north and south, but then she disappeared. What happened to Amelia? This question still haunts people today. The Istika, along with the U.S. Navy, began searching for Amelia's plane immediately. The Navy thought she may have gone down in a storm to the northwest of Howland Island. The search continued for weeks. No sign of the plane, Amelia, or Fred was found. After a year of searching, Amelia's husband, George Putnam, concluded that she had perished, that means died, at sea. But is that the full story? This is one of the ships that was looking for her. Many people have tried to explain what happened to Amelia. Some think Amelia and Fred survived an emergency landing and were picked up by a Japanese ship. They were kept as prisoners on a Japanese island and later died of disease. Others think that Amelia landed the plane, but at a different island. There, she and Fred were able to live on native foods, but eventually died either of disease or old age. It says this picture is a piece of the they think it's a piece of the airplane that was found on an island near where she disappeared. And so if I said there's lots of theories about what happened to her, I could look for some key details of what are some theories that happened, of what happened to her when she disappeared. One is that they survived a landing and they were picked up by a Japanese ship. And they were kept as prisoners and died of disease on that ship. Or that she landed the plane on a different island and they were able to live on that island. Many think these theories were just made up. They believe that the most likely answer is that the plane landed in the water. It would have quickly broken apart in the fierce waves over 10 feet high. Perhaps before Amelia and Fred could have inflated their life raft, they drowned. Whatever her fate, there is no doubt that Amelia Earhart is one of the greatest Americans of the 20th century. She died doing what she loved most. She showed everyone that women didn't have to live with limits. She showed people that anyone could fly. She changed the world. She was a legend. So finally, I could say what really happened to Amelia, what most likely happened to her, and I could look in the text for my answer. Right here. The most likely answer is that they landed the plane on the water, and unfortunately, like, it just was destroyed by the water and she probably drowned. So today we talked about using key details to support the main idea. So remember, once we say what the main idea is, we have to use that text to prove our answer, to show why we think that. And that's it for today. I'll see you guys next time.